Alrighty, y'all. So what we're doing here is we're going to go through each of the 6 units, just kind of one by one, in order to prep for the AP test. So this is going to be Unit 1, and then you'll go through the practice for Unit 2, and in a couple days we'll go through another video again, just kind of making sure that we're on the right track. So for Unit 1 here, it's just kind of going over some of the basic terminology. If we're looking at economics and what it's all about, we're looking at this issue of scarcity, and how we have limited resources but unlimited wants and needs, so we've got to make decisions on how to deal with these scarce resources. One of the tools that we use for this is our production possibilities curve. Right, so this is our graph that was kind of looking like this right here, where we're comparing the production of 2 different goods, and we'll go over some practice with it in just a second, but it's this idea we've got limited resources, limited workers, limited tools, limited materials, and so we've got to make decisions on what to do with them. The more we make of one product, the harder it is to make of the other. So the production possibilities curve shows the different combinations of 2 goods that can be produced using all the country's resources to the fullest. So this curve right here represents the maximum efficiency, the best use of resources that we've got. So this production possibility curve can shift outwards when there are more resources or more productivity from new technology or new resources. So if we think about like the creation of like the assembly line, that would be a good example there, right? That it pushed all of these production possibility curves outwards, because now we can make more cars or more planes or more tanks for World War II or more ships. That technology allowed us to produce more of everything. Another big topic we're going to look at is absolute and comparative advantage. Let's remember that comparative advantage is when we're looking at a country that can produce something at a lower opportunity cost. So it's not necessarily about who can do it the best, it's about who can do it the best at the lowest cost. If we look at the US and oil, we've got an absolute advantage in producing oil. We can make more than any other country. But places like Iraq and Afghanistan and Saudi Arabia, they would have the comparative advantage because they've got a lower opportunity cost of producing it. They're not giving up as much as we are by producing it. If we're looking at the final kind of piece of this unit, as far as markets and how markets change, we're looking at the relationship between supply and demand here and how they interact. So we'll spend a lot of time looking over those graphs and how supply and demand kind of dictate prices and quantity and all that. So when we're looking at this idea of scarcity, we're looking at the fact that we have unlimited wants and needs, but we have limited resources. So if we're looking at money, that's why people budget. We have limited money, but we have plenty of things that we need, plenty of things that we want, and so we've got to deal with that limited money by budgeting it out. We have to deal with limited time by making schedules. Countries have to deal with scarcity by deciding who gets what resources. So if we're breaking these productive resources up into these 4 categories, we can remember our acronym CELL. This is just kind of a different order, but we're looking at labor, we're looking at capital, we're looking at entrepreneurship, and we're looking at land. Capital would be the tools that we're using. Labor would be the people doing the task. Land resources would be the natural resources, anything you could find out in nature. And the entrepreneur is the one bringing together these factors of production. So if we're looking at a restaurant, the land resources would be the raw materials, the eggs, the milk, the butter, any kind of raw, I guess not the butter, but the milk or tomatoes. The labor would be the chefs or the servers or the cashiers. The capital would be the tools that you're using, the knives, the spatula, the grill, the fryer, but also the skills, the human capital. And that kind of takes us to number 3 there. The physical capital are the tangible tools that we're using. So that would be like the knife or the fryer or grill for a kitchen. The human capital are the skills. So the knowledge on how to cook a steak, or the knowledge on how to make a certain type of soup, or the knowledge on how to cook a chicken so it doesn't get people sick. All of that would be human capital. Now, looking at this production possibility curve here, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about up there. We're looking at these 2 different combinations of what we can make, consumer goods and capital goods. And it gives us a schedule here that we can kind of graph out, that if I make just capital goods, just consumer goods, I can't make any capital goods. So I could do 30 consumer goods and no capital goods. If I decide I want to make some capital goods, though, that means I'm going to have to sacrifice some of those consumer goods, right? This production possibility curve looks at the best combinations that I can produce. So I could do 1 capital good and 29 consumer goods. I can make 2 capital goods and 25 consumer goods. I can make, hey, we don't need to be talking now. We can make 3 capital goods and 15 consumer goods, 3 and 15. Or I could just make all capital goods, 4. So any combination on this curve right here represents maximum efficiency. Right, we've got point A, B, C, D, E. Whether I'm making all of one, all of the other, or a combination here, on this line is the maximum efficiency that I have. So we can use this curve for a couple different reasons. It's asking us to label a couple points here. First off is this inefficiency. So if I know that these combinations are the best that I could do, then anywhere inside of this curve would represent inefficiency. If I only made 10 consumer goods and 1 capital good, well, I'm not doing as well as I should be able to. Maybe my workers called in sick, maybe my machinery broke down, or I ran out of resources. I'm not making as much as I could. So anywhere inside of this curve would be inefficient. And at the same time, if this frontier, this line represents the best I could do, anywhere outside would be currently unattainable. I couldn't do 30 consumer goods and 4 capital goods. With the limited resources I have, that'd be impossible. We could also, efficiency would represent anywhere on this curve. So all of these points are efficient here. Now, if we're using it to look at opportunity cost, we can look at how by making more of one thing, we're having to sacrifice some of the other. If I go from point A to point B, I'm gaining 1 capital good. My opportunity cost, though, is I have to give up one of those consumer goods. If I'm looking at going from point B to point C, I'm gaining another capital good, but here I'm giving up 4 consumer goods, going from 29 to 25. So we see that we have an increasing opportunity cost here. The more I make of one thing, it becomes increasingly difficult to make the other. Now if I go from E to D, now I'm gaining 15 consumer goods. My opportunity cost is that 1 capital good that I'm having to give up. And if I go from C to A, I'm gaining 5 consumer goods. My opportunity cost would be those 2 capital goods that I'm giving up. So assume combination D was produced rather than combination B. Will this economy's growth rate increase, decrease, or stay the same? This is kind of getting us thinking about the difference between capital and consumer goods. Consumer goods are meant to be consumed, like a burger or a car or clothing. Capital goods are the tools, right, that we're using to produce other things. So if we're producing at point D rather than point B, that means that we're making more capital goods and fewer consumer goods. Capital goods are good for the economy, right? That would be our tractors or our semi-trucks or our factories, our farms. So by producing more capital goods, that's going to allow us to be more productive. So our economy's growth rate would increase because those capital goods are going to help us produce other things. For 6, products with blank opportunity costs have similar resources and result in a straight. So this would be our constant opportunity cost. If I'm looking at a farm that has 100 acres, every acre of potatoes that I grow, I'd have to give up an acre of something else. They're all sharing that same land, and so it would be a constant opportunity cost. Every acre I add of one thing, I'd have to give up an acre of something else. Every class of econ that I teach, I have to give up 1 class of something else. But for most things, we would see that we would have an increasing opportunity cost. And that's what we see right here where our production possibility curve is kind of bowed outwards. Because as we're producing more capital goods, it becomes increasingly difficult to make those consumer goods because they need different tools and resources and workers. So each, like going from A to B, I'm losing 1 consumer good. B to C, I'm losing 4. C to D, I'm losing 5, or hold on 1 second. From C to D, I'm losing 10, and then from D to E, I'm losing 15. So as I'm making more consumer goods, it's becoming increasingly difficult to make those capital goods, and vice versa. Now, if we're looking at drawing out these production possibility curves, let's just kind of do each of these scenarios now and see how this curve would shift. So this is based on what we can do now. If something changes about our ability to produce, that's going to shift this production. That's going to shift this production possibility curve. So if we're looking at a recession causing unemployment, let's loop back around to that one in just a second, actually. Consumers want more pizza. All right, so that one, if we're looking at consumers, we're looking at, we're looking at how much people want the good, that doesn't change our ability to make the good. So the curve wouldn't shift there. If we're looking at a recession causing unemployment, this one also wouldn't shift the curve, but what we would see there is that we would be somewhere inside of this curve, inefficiency. And the reason that this curve isn't shifting is because this still represents the best that I can do. If we get out of that recession and those people get back to work, then we'd be back on this line producing as much as we did before. So if there's, and this is going to sound weird, but if there's unemployment, we'd be inside of this curve. But let's say that those workers, died, that curve would shift inwards. We'd have fewer workers to produce, we would be producing less then. So if there's unemployment, we're just inside of this curve. Now the final one, if we're looking at more resources to produce cars, that would affect this production possibility curve. But it would only affect one side of it. It's not going to make it any easier to make the pizzas, but it's going to lead to more cars that we can produce. That production possibility curve would shift outwards, but specifically just with cars. There we go. Now, one of the parts of this that we had the most trouble with was these terms of trade and the absolute and comparative advantage. So let's go through a couple practice ones on this before we get into supply and demand. So when we're looking at these comparative advantage questions, there's two different types. We've got the two different options down here. We've got input questions and we've got output questions. Input questions are measuring the inputs, like how many hours it takes to produce something. Outputs are measuring how much of the good we can produce. So if we're looking at this one on the left, we're measuring the number of planes in the cars. We're measuring the outputs here. A high value is a good thing. If we're looking at it over on the right, we're measuring how many hours it takes to make a ton of beef or a boat. And so in that case, a low value would be a good thing. So let's take a look at how we set these up now. So first off, for 11 is asking us which country would have the absolute advantage in producing planes. So if Italy can make 10 planes, let's say in a given day, and Germany can produce 25 planes, well, Germany would have the absolute advantage in planes. They can make more than Italy can. All right. Next is asking us Italy's opportunity cost for producing one car. So we're looking for per unit opportunity cost here. So we need to figure out not only, like for Italy, producing cars, if they produce 40 cars, they're having to give up 10 planes. But if we're looking at the opportunity cost for each car, we're going to have to divide it. So for our output questions, the opportunity cost goes over what we produce. Right? So if I'm making the 40 cars, I'm giving up the 10 planes. The 10 planes is the other, so that would go over the 40 cars. So in that case, one car is going to cost me 1/4 of a plane. So the opportunity cost of producing one car would be 1/4 of a plane. So the next part is asking us the comparative advantage in producing planes. We need to figure out the per unit opportunity cost for all of these then. So if we're looking at Italy and planes, if they produce the planes, they're giving up the cars. So that would be the other. 40 cars, 10 planes. One plane is going to equal 4 cars. And so they'll always be reciprocals of one another, right? Meaning that if you multiplied 4 by 1/4, it would equal 1. If we're looking at Germany, they're producing the 25 planes. The other would be the 50 cars. So 50 cars over 25 planes. One plane is going to equal 2 cars. So this side, one car should equal half of a plane. If we're producing the 50 cars, the other would be the 25 planes. All right, again, let's hold on to the conversations. So the 25 planes would be the opportunity cost. The 50 cars is what we're gaining. So one car is going to equal half of a plane. So here we've got our opportunity cost here, our per unit opportunity cost. And let's remember that comparative advantage is looking at who has the lowest per unit opportunity cost. So not who could do it the best, because Germany can produce both of these the best, right? They've got the absolute advantage in planes and cars. But it's about the opportunity cost. So if we're looking at producing planes, if Italy produces planes, they're giving up 4 cars. If Germany produces planes, they're giving up 2 cars. So they would have the comparative advantage there because they have the lowest per unit opportunity cost. If we're looking at who has the comparative advantage for cars, it would be Italy. They're giving up 1/4 of a plane, whereas Germany would have to give up half. So if we're looking at, and this is the part that we were kind of struggling with at the end, if we're looking at Germany making planes, and Italy making cars, assuming that both countries need both things, they're going to have to trade with each other. So what would be a trade that would benefit both sides? So all you need to do is pick a side, and then you're picking a value between these two numbers. It already gives us one plane here. So I know on this side one plane equals, if we do anything greater than 2 but less than 4, it should work. So let's try one plane for 3 cars. The reciprocal of that would be 1 car equaling a third of a plane. That's me dividing this by 3 and this by 3. So if we look at whether this works out, let's start out with Italy. Right now Italy's making cars. If they wanted to make their own plane, they'd have to give up 4 cars. Or they could trade with Germany and give up 3 cars. So they're better off trading. So it's good for Italy. All right, Germany is making the planes. If they wanted to make a car, they'd have to give up half of a plane. Or they could trade with Italy and give up a third of a plane. So that deal works with them as well. So this terms of trade would benefit both sides. Now when we're looking at the input questions, the only difference is, first off, with the absolute advantage, lower is better. So if because we're measuring the number of hours here. If it takes Chile 20 hours to make a ton of beef, and it takes Brazil 10 hours to make a ton of beef, well then Brazil's doing it better. Right? They can do it in fewer hours. So for these input questions, this would be our output, or this would be our output, and this would be our input. So for these input questions, lower is better, right? Brazil's better at making the beef, it takes them fewer hours. Brazil's better at making the boats, it takes them fewer hours. Next it's asking us the opportunity cost for producing beef. You'll notice here that it doesn't say the per unit opportunity cost, and it doesn't say one beef either. But let's go ahead and break down the per unit opportunity cost anyway, because it's doing it in hours. So for these input questions, let's remember that the opportunity cost goes under what we're producing. So the output question, op on top. For the input question, opportunity goes under. So for Chile, the other is the 60 votes. We're flipping the input and the output here. We're flipping the numerator and denominator to make this input question an output question, essentially. So the opportunity cost is going under, so the 60 votes is going under the 20 beef that we're producing. So one beef is going to cost me a third of a vote. All right, and the flip side of that, if I'm producing the boat, the opportunity cost is the beef. So I'm going to put the 20 beef under the 60 boat. So one boat is going to cost me 3 beef. Now, one way that we can look at this is, if I have 60 hours to produce boats or beef, right, in that 60 hours, I could produce 1 boat, or I could produce 3 beef, right? One boat is going to equal 3 beef. Now, if we do Brazil, the opportunity cost is the 20 boat. So the opportunity cost goes under what I'm producing. So 20 boats, 10 beef. All right, 1 beef is going to equal half of a boat. And 1 boat is going to equal 2 beef. So Chile's opportunity cost for producing beef, where are we at? Chile, beef, they're giving up a third of a boat, right? That in the time that they can make 1 ton of beef, they could also be making a third of a boat. Which country has a comparative advantage in producing boats? All right, so here, if we're looking at the boat side of things, Chile makes it, they're giving up 3 beef. Brazil makes it, they're giving up 2 beef. They would have the comparative advantage. If we're looking at for beef, Chile would have to give up a third of a boat. Brazil gives up half of a boat. Chile would have the comparative advantage because they're giving up less boats. So the comparative advantage for producing boats would be Brazil because they're giving up less beef. Now, if we're looking at a terms of trade that would make them both better off, it's saying 1 boat over here. So again, anything greater than 2 beef but less than 3 beef should work. 2.5 beets, 2 1/4 beef, any of that would work. Anything more than that, and Chile is not better off. Anything less than that, Brazil is not better off. We're trying to find something within that range right there. All right, the next video, we'll take a look at supply and demand and equilibrium.